The city lights glittered outside the tall glass windows of the penthouse. From the outside, it looked like a dream life: luxury cars parked below, staff always on call, and a skyline view that could leave anyone speechless. Inside the penthouse lived a man who, to the world, was known as one of the richest businessmen of his time. His name was Alexander Hayes, a billionaire who built his empire from investments, technology, and years of determination. People admired him, envied him, and feared him in the corporate world. But those who saw him from a distance could never imagine the silent struggles he carried every single day. Alexander was not alone in his home. His most precious companion was his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. She was the brightest star in his life, yet she carried with her a challenge that made every day unpredictable. Lily was autistic, and though her father loved her more than anything in the world, he often felt helpless in giving her what she needed. She found comfort in patterns, in quietness, and in routine. Sudden changes, loud noises, or unfamiliar places could unsettle her, and when she felt overwhelmed, it was difficult for anyone, even her father, to bring her peace again. Alexander had every resource at his disposal. Therapists, doctors, private teachers, all were hired to help Lily live comfortably. But money, he learned, could only go so far. What he longed for the most was a connection with his daughter, something deeper than schedules, routines, or therapies. Sometimes she would hold his hand, and he would feel as though he had won the whole world. Other times, she would retreat into her quiet world, leaving him standing there, wishing he knew how to reach her. This evening, Alexander had made a decision. He wanted to try something different, something simple yet meaningful. Instead of another dinner at home surrounded by servants and chefs, he decided to take Lily out to a small family restaurant. It wasn't one of the high-end places he usually visited with his business partners. It was a modest little diner, the kind of place he hadn't stepped into in years. He hoped that the change might bring him closer to his daughter, even if just for a moment. As he prepared Lily for the outing, he felt both nervous and hopeful. She wore her favorite soft blue dress, the one with tiny white flowers stitched along the edge. She clutched her small stuffed rabbit, a toy she carried everywhere. Alexander bent down, fixing her little hair clip in place, and whispered gently, "We're going out tonight, Lily. Just you and me." Her eyes flickered up at him. She didn't reply with words, but she gave a small nod. For Alexander, that was enough. The chauffeur drove them to the restaurant, but unlike his usual entrances with bodyguards and assistants, tonight Alexander wanted no attention. He asked the chauffeur to wait outside quietly and walked in holding Lily's hand. The warm smell of fried food and fresh bread greeted them, so different from the delicate dishes prepared at his mansion. Families sat at tables, talking, laughing, clinking glasses. The place had life in it, a kind of ordinary joy Alexander rarely experienced in his world of formal dinners. He chose a quiet corner booth, away from the busiest part of the room. Lily slid into the seat, her rabbit placed carefully beside her. She looked around, her eyes darting from table to table, studying the lights and the soft music playing in the background. For now, she seemed calm, and Alexander felt a glimmer of hope. A waitress soon approached their table. She wore a simple uniform, her hair tied neatly back, and her smile was bright but not forced. She handed them menus, though Alexander already knew he'd let Lily decide. He leaned toward his daughter, pointing gently at the pictures on the menu. "Would you like some fries? Or maybe pancakes?" he asked softly. Lily traced her small finger across the menu, stopping at the picture of pancakes. She didn't say a word, but her choice was clear. Alexander smiled warmly. "Pancakes it is." As they waited for the food, Alexander tried to make small conversation, though he knew Lily might not respond much. He told her about the lights outside, about how proud he was of her for coming with him tonight, about little things that meant the world to him. Sometimes she hummed softly, her way of calming herself, and he listened to that hum as though it were music meant only for him. Yet beneath the calmness, Alexander carried worry. He knew how quickly things could change for Lily. One sudden loud noise, a burst of laughter from another table, or even the clatter of plates could unsettle her. He wanted the night to be special, but he had no control over what might happen. Still, he kept his composure, holding on to the hope that tonight might be different. As he watched her sitting there with her stuffed rabbit beside her plate, he couldn't help but think about how little the outside world understood her. To many people, she was just a quiet child who acted differently. But to him, she was a whole universe. He remembered the day she was diagnosed, the flood of emotions he had felt, and the vow he made to always protect her. No matter how much money he earned or how many companies he built, she remained the most important part of his life. Around them, families continued eating, children laughed, and conversations filled the air. Alexander found himself studying these ordinary scenes with a strange longing. He had all the wealth in the world, but he realized how rare it was for him to experience something so simple, just a meal with people he loved, without business deals, without flashing cameras, without schedules. He looked at Lily again, her small fingers now drumming lightly on the table in a pattern only she understood. She was in her world, but she was there with him, and that was enough. When the pancakes arrived, Lily's eyes brightened just a little. She picked up her fork with care, tasting the first bite. Alexander smiled, feeling a wave of relief. For this one moment, the world seemed right. He ate slowly, not because he was hungry but because he wanted the evening to last as long as it could. Inside his heart, though, was a quiet fear. He knew how delicate these moments were. He had seen before how quickly Lily could go from calm to distressed, how sudden sounds or movements could overwhelm her. He prayed silently that tonight would remain peaceful. More than anything, he wanted his daughter to feel safe, happy, and loved in this little diner. Alexander didn't know that in just a short while, this ordinary evening would bring him face to face with someone who would change his perspective forever. For now, he was just a father, sitting in a corner booth with his daughter, holding on to a fragile but beautiful moment of peace, unaware of the encounter that awaited him. The smell of warm pancakes still lingered in the air, and for a few minutes everything seemed calm. Alexander watched his daughter eating slowly, each bite taken with careful attention. She tapped her fingers lightly on the table, humming softly under her breath, the stuffed rabbit always close to her side. To him, this was a small miracle. He had seen too many days where even something as simple as breakfast could turn into a storm of tears. Tonight felt almost magical, and he prayed it would last. But the peace did not stay long. It began with the clattering of plates at a nearby table. A waiter dropped a tray, and the sound crashed against the floor, sharp and sudden. The restaurant filled with the echo of it, and though most people laughed lightly or turned their heads for a moment before going back to their meals, Lily froze. Her fork slipped from her hand, hitting the plate with a small metallic sound. Her shoulders stiffened, her eyes wide, and her little fingers gripped the edge of the table as if the world had just shifted around her. Alexander noticed it instantly. His heart sank. He leaned closer, speaking gently. "It's okay, Lily. Just a plate. Nothing to worry about." But she didn't respond. Her humming stopped, and instead a whimper escaped her lips. She covered her ears with both hands, shaking her head. The restaurant was suddenly too loud for her, the chatter, the clinking glasses, the laughter of children at another table. Each sound layered over the other until it became unbearable for her. Alexander reached out, placing his hand softly on hers, but she pulled away and pressed her face against her stuffed rabbit. "Shhh, sweetheart," he whispered, trying to calm her. His voice was soft, almost pleading. But the more he tried, the more restless she became. She slid down in her seat, rocking slightly, her breathing quickening. To anyone else in the restaurant, it might have looked like a child throwing a tantrum. But Alexander knew better. This wasn't misbehavior. This was his daughter's world closing in on her, and she didn't know how to escape it. He felt the eyes of other customers turning toward them. Some glanced briefly and looked away. Others stared a little longer, their expressions mixed curiosity, pity, even annoyance. A couple at a nearby table whispered to each other, shaking their heads. Alexander could almost hear their silent judgment, a spoiled child, a father who couldn't control her. Inside him, frustration and helplessness rose like a storm. He had faced countless challenges in business crises that threatened millions, negotiations that required all his strength, but nothing in the world made him feel as powerless as this moment. "Lily, it's all right," he said again, gently stroking her arm. He tried offering her the fork back, then a piece of pancake, then even the rabbit, though she already held it close. Nothing worked. She pressed her face into the rabbit's fur, muffling her whimpers. Alexander considered leaving. Maybe it was better to go back home where everything was quiet and safe. But deep down, he knew if he pulled her out too quickly, it might make things worse. He wanted to stay, to help her learn that she was safe even in places that felt overwhelming. Still, in this moment, he had no answers. The laughter from another table suddenly erupted loudly, and Lily's distress grew. She covered her ears again, rocking more intensely now. Her whimpers turned into cries. "It's okay, Lily, Daddy's here," Alexander said again, his voice breaking slightly. But the truth was, he didn't know how to make it okay. He could feel sweat gathering on his forehead. He hated this feeling not because of embarrassment in front of strangers, but because he felt like he was failing her. He had all the money, all the influence, yet he couldn't give his daughter peace when she needed it most. A waiter walked past their table, glancing briefly at the scene but not stopping. The clatter of the kitchen door opening and closing only added to Lily's discomfort. The world around them felt like a storm pressing in on their quiet corner. Alexander remembered nights at home when she had gone through similar struggles. At least there, he could dim the lights, close the curtains, or hold her gently until she calmed. Here, surrounded by strangers and noise, he felt trapped. He tried to breathe deeply, reminding himself to stay calm, because Lily often mirrored his emotions. If he panicked, she would feel it too. But the weight of all the staring eyes pressed on him heavily. He imagined what people were thinking. A billionaire, sitting helpless in a family diner, unable to comfort his own child. They didn't know her, didn't understand autism, and he couldn't explain it to every stranger who stared. He bent closer, lowering his voice to almost a whisper. "Lily, Daddy's here. Just hold my hand." He extended his hand slowly, carefully, hoping she would take it. For a moment she hesitated, her little body still trembling, her eyes still shut tight. Then she shook her head again, pulling away, retreating further into herself. The rejection cut deeper than he expected. He knew it wasn't personal, she wasn't rejecting him, she was rejecting the noise, the chaos, the world that felt too heavy for her. But still, it broke something inside him. He wanted to hold her, to be her shelter, and yet he couldn't reach her. Other parents at nearby tables continued to glance over, some with sympathetic smiles, others with quiet disapproval. Alexander avoided their eyes. To them, he was just another man with a restless child. They couldn't see the truth that he was fighting a battle far greater than their eyes could measure. Minutes felt like hours as he tried every way he knew to soothe her. He whispered, he hummed softly, he rubbed her back. But nothing seemed to help. The storm inside her only grew stronger. At that moment, Alexander's chest tightened with a mix of sadness and guilt. He had faced life with unshakable confidence, but here he was, reduced to a father begging for his daughter's peace. He thought of all the times he had told himself that money could fix things. Tonight, he realized once again that money was powerless against this struggle. Just as despair began to weigh heavier on him, something unexpected happened. From across the room, someone noticed, not with judgment, not with pity, but with quiet compassion. The waitress who had first brought their menus watched closely, her eyes filled with understanding rather than annoyance. She had seen customers like this before, parents struggling, children overwhelmed. But there was something in this moment that touched her deeply. While Alexander wrestled with his emotions, the waitress slowly moved toward the table, her steps quiet, her face calm. She seemed to sense that this was not just about serving food. This was about something greater, something human. Alexander, caught in his battle to calm Lily, did not even notice her approach at first. He was lost in his own helplessness, unaware that help was about to come from a place he least expected. And in the next few moments, everything would change. Alexander's heart sank deeper as he held his daughter's trembling shoulders. He whispered again and again, telling her she was safe, telling her he was there, but his words floated into the air like feathers that never reached her. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her body rocking back and forth, and her stuffed rabbit was clutched so tightly in her arms that it seemed like her only anchor to the world. Around them, the restaurant continued as if nothing had changed, but for Alexander, the world had shrunk to this single moment of helplessness. And then, softly, another voice joined the moment. It wasn't loud or sharp, but gentle and soothing, like a quiet song carried by the wind. "Hi there, sweetheart," the voice said. Alexander looked up quickly. It was the waitress. The same young woman who had brought their menus earlier. She stood by the table now, her hands loosely folded in front of her, her face calm. She didn't look uncomfortable or judgmental, the way some of the other guests had. Instead, her expression was filled with patience, as though she had walked into this moment not to interrupt but to share in it. Alexander opened his mouth to protest, perhaps to tell her it was fine, that they didn't need help, but the words stopped on his tongue. There was something in her manner, in the way she didn't rush forward or raise her voice. She simply crouched down, lowering herself so that she was on Lily's level, not towering above her. "Is that your bunny?" she asked softly, pointing toward the stuffed rabbit in Lily's arms. Her tone was gentle, like she was asking about the most important treasure in the world. Lily's rocking slowed just slightly. She didn't open her eyes, but she hugged the bunny tighter, as if acknowledging the question. The waitress smiled, not too wide, not forced, just enough to let Lily know she was safe. "He looks like a very good friend," she continued. "Does he have a name?" Alexander watched in disbelief. For minutes he had tried everything he knew, and yet this young woman, with no script, no preparation, was finding a way to step into Lily's world. At first, there was silence. Lily only breathed heavily, her little chest rising and falling as she pressed her face against the rabbit's fur. But then, in the faintest whisper, almost too soft to hear, she murmured, "Benny." Alexander's heart skipped a beat. She had spoken. His daughter, who often kept her words locked inside, had answered. The waitress's eyes lit up warmly, but she didn't overreact. She didn't clap or exclaim, which might have startled Lily. Instead, she nodded with respect, as though she had been given a precious secret. "Benny," she repeated gently. "That's a perfect name." For the first time since the clatter of plates, Lily peeked out from behind her bunny. Her big eyes looked toward the waitress, studying her face, measuring her presence. The young woman didn't push further. She simply sat there on her knees, keeping her voice low and steady. "I used to have a bear," she said softly. "I called him Mr. Brown. He went everywhere with me. Do you take Benny everywhere?" Lily nodded faintly. Her rocking slowed even more, and her hands loosened from her ears. Alexander sat frozen. He didn't dare move, afraid that even the smallest interruption might break the delicate thread that had been woven between his daughter and this stranger. The waitress glanced at him briefly, her eyes kind, then returned her focus to Lily. She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small notepad she used for taking orders. Tearing off a blank sheet, she folded it carefully into a little shape. With nimble fingers, she created a simple paper boat. Then she placed it gently on the table, not sliding it toward Lily too quickly, but leaving it where she could see it. "This is for Benny," she whispered. "Maybe he can go sailing." Lily blinked at the boat. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out one hand and touched the folded paper. Her breathing eased, the tears on her cheeks drying into faint streaks. She placed Benny next to the boat, as if giving him a new toy. A smile spread across Alexander's face, though his eyes were glassy with unshed tears. He had never seen anyone calm Lily so quickly, so naturally. It felt as though this waitress had stepped into his daughter's world without forcing her to leave it. The waitress stayed crouched, never rushing, never standing tall as if to intimidate. "Would you like me to bring Benny some pancakes too?" she asked with a playful whisper. For the first time that evening, Lily gave a tiny laugh, quiet, almost hidden, but enough to make Alexander's chest ache with joy. She shook her head slightly, her lips curving into the smallest of smiles. The waitress chuckled softly in response, as though they had just shared a secret between friends. Then she looked up at Alexander, her expression both gentle and respectful. She didn't say anything about what she had done, didn't offer an explanation or ask for praise. She simply gave him a look that said, "It's okay. You're not alone." Alexander felt an overwhelming rush of gratitude. He had walked into this restaurant believing he would be the one protecting and guiding his daughter. Yet here was a stranger, a young woman with no wealth, no power, no fame, who had given Lily something he couldn't, a moment of peace, a feeling of being understood. The restaurant around them continued its hum of noise, but somehow, in their little corner, the storm had calmed. Lily placed her bunny beside the paper boat, arranging them carefully as if they were playing together. Her small fingers no longer trembled. Alexander leaned back in his seat slowly, trying to steady his own emotions. He wanted to thank the waitress, but he found himself speechless. Words seemed too small for what had just happened. The waitress stood up quietly, brushing off her apron. "I'll bring some extra syrup for the pancakes," she said softly, giving Lily one last smile before walking away. As she left, Alexander finally exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath the entire time. He looked at his daughter, who was now tapping the paper boat gently with her finger, whispering something to Benny. It was then Alexander understood something he had never truly accepted before. Love and care could not be measured by money or power. He had spent years hiring experts, reading books, following programs. But sometimes, what a child needed most was not expertise, but kindness. He glanced toward the waitress again as she moved between tables, carrying trays, smiling at other customers, returning to her ordinary work as though she hadn't just performed a miracle. He wondered what kind of life she lived, what gave her the patience and warmth to approach his daughter the way she had. Inside, his heart swelled with both gratitude and humility. He had been given a gift tonight, not of wealth or status, but of human connection. He knew this moment would stay with him forever. Lily, calmer now, looked up at him briefly and whispered, "Benny likes the boat." Alexander nearly broke down. He reached across the table, his hand trembling, and touched hers gently. "I like it too, sweetheart," he said softly. "I like it too." For the rest of the meal, Lily remained calm, quietly playing with the paper boat and her bunny. Alexander sat quietly, his eyes often drifting to the waitress, his mind filled with questions, his heart filled with a strange new awareness. He had entered the restaurant a billionaire father struggling with his daughter's world. He didn't know it yet, but he would leave with more than just a memory. He would leave with a lesson that would change the way he saw life, kindness, and the value of a human heart. Alexander sat in silence as his daughter gently tapped the paper boat on the table, whispering little words to Benny as if she was telling him a secret story. Her face was calm now, her body relaxed, and for the first time that evening, she seemed truly at peace. Alexander's heart swelled with relief, but his mind was racing. He had just watched a stranger, a waitress he didn't even know, do something that he, with all his money and all his effort, had struggled to achieve. She had stepped into his daughter's world, not by force, but with kindness and patience. The waitress returned with the extra syrup, setting it carefully on the table. She gave Lily a warm smile, but not too much attention, just enough to let the child feel acknowledged without feeling pressured. Lily glanced at her, then back to Benny, continuing her small game. "Thank you," Alexander said quietly, his voice a little rough with emotion. The waitress nodded politely. "She's a sweet girl," she replied softly. "She just needed a little space." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that sank into Alexander's heart. A little space. He thought about how often he had tried to pull Lily closer when she wasn't ready, how often he had felt frustrated when she didn't respond. Maybe what she needed wasn't someone to change her, but someone willing to wait beside her, to give her time. As the meal went on, Alexander couldn't stop glancing at the young woman. She moved gracefully between tables, taking orders, carrying trays, smiling at families. To most people, she was just another waitress working late into the evening. But to Alexander, she had become something far greater. She had given him a glimpse of what true compassion looked like. When Lily finally finished her pancakes, Alexander noticed her growing quieter again, but not in distress, just in her usual, calm way. He knew it was time to leave before the noise of the restaurant overwhelmed her again. Carefully, he packed up her little bunny and folded the paper boat, tucking it into his pocket so she wouldn't lose it. Then he stood, guiding her gently by the hand. As they walked toward the exit, Alexander stopped near the counter where the waitress was writing down an order. He hesitated for a moment, then cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said softly. She looked up and smiled. "Yes, sir. I want to thank you," he said. His words felt clumsy, too small for what he truly felt. "You helped my daughter in a way I can't even describe. I don't know how you did it, but, thank you." The waitress shook her head lightly. "You don't need to thank me. She just needed someone to listen." Alexander studied her face. She was young, maybe in her 20s, with tired eyes that hinted at long hours of work, yet her smile remained genuine. He wondered what her life was like outside of this restaurant. Did she have children of her own? Did she have dreams she was chasing? He wanted to know more, not out of curiosity, but because something inside him told him she was special. "What's your name?" he asked. "Grace," she replied simply. The name suited her perfectly, Alexander thought. Grace. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that many wealthy people he knew lacked. "It's nice to meet you, Grace," he said sincerely. "I'm Alexander." Her eyes flickered with recognition. She had probably seen his face on television or in magazines, but she didn't show any sign of being impressed or nervous. She treated him just the same as any other customer, and in that moment, Alexander appreciated her even more. "You're very kind," he added. Grace shrugged gently. "I just try to do what I can. Sometimes people need more than food. They need to feel seen." Alexander's chest tightened. Her words echoed in his heart. To feel seen. That was exactly what Lily had needed tonight, and Grace had given it to her without hesitation. They left the restaurant shortly after, stepping into the cool night air. The city lights twinkled above them, and Lily held onto her bunny while walking beside her father. Alexander guided her to the car, but his mind was still with Grace, still replaying the way she had crouched down to meet his daughter at eye level, the way she had spoken softly and patiently, the way she had respected Lily's world instead of trying to pull her out of it. In the car, as the chauffeur drove them back to the penthouse, Alexander sat quietly, watching Lily rest her head against the window. She looked peaceful, and he realized that tonight she had been given something he hadn't been able to give her himself: comfort from someone who truly understood without needing explanations. For the first time in years, Alexander felt humbled. He had spent his whole life building walls of wealth and success, believing that money could solve everything. But tonight showed him that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought. Compassion, patience, and understanding came from the heart, not from a bank account. That night, after tucking Lily into bed and watching her fall asleep with Benny by her side, Alexander stood by the window of his penthouse. The city stretched endlessly below him, a world of lights and noise that he usually conquered with confidence. But tonight, he felt small. Not in a weak way, but in a way that opened his eyes. He thought of Grace again, her tired eyes, her simple uniform, her warm voice. She worked in a small restaurant, probably struggling with bills or long shifts, yet she had given his daughter something priceless. What did that say about the world he lived in? What did that say about him? The next day, Alexander couldn't shake the thought of her. In his business meetings, while people spoke about profits and investments, his mind drifted back to that moment at the diner. He remembered Lily whispering "Benny likes the boat" and laughing softly, and how that laugh had felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. He owed that moment to Grace. Later that week, Alexander returned to the restaurant alone. He wore casual clothes this time, not his usual tailored suit, wanting to blend in. Grace was there again, serving tables with the same quiet kindness. When she noticed him, she gave a polite nod, as though he were just another customer. After finishing a simple meal, he waited until she had a moment free. "Grace," he said as she came by his table. "I wanted to thank you again. What you did for my daughter. I won't forget it." Grace smiled softly. "She's a wonderful girl. You're doing your best for her. That's what matters." Alexander felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to tell her how much her words meant, how deeply they had changed him, but he couldn't find the right way. Instead, he asked gently, "Do you have dreams, Grace? Something you want to do beyond this place?" She looked surprised by the question, then a little shy. "I'd like to study one day. Maybe work with children. But for now, I just do what I can." Alexander nodded slowly. Her dream made perfect sense. She already had the heart of someone who understood children deeply. He could see it in the way she had reached Lily. When he left the diner that day, he made a silent promise to himself. He would not only remember Grace's kindness, but he would honor it. She deserved more than to go unnoticed in a busy world. She deserved a chance to live the life she dreamed of. More importantly, Alexander promised himself that he would change too. He wouldn't let his wealth be a wall between him and his daughter anymore. He would learn from Grace, learn to wait, to listen, to give space, and most of all, to see Lily for who she truly was. That evening, as he sat with Lily at home, helping her line up her toys in neat rows, he didn't try to change her game or make her do something else. He just sat beside her, watching, waiting, and joining in when she let him. And when she looked up at him and gave a faint smile, Alexander felt as though he had been given the greatest treasure of his life. The weeks after that evening at the little diner became a turning point in Alexander's life. On the surface, his routine remained the same: meetings in tall glass buildings, conversations about millions of dollars, decisions that influenced entire companies. But inside, something had changed forever. He no longer looked at his life the same way. Every time he saw Lily playing quietly in her room, every time he watched her tap her fingers to a rhythm only she understood, He remembered Grace. He remembered the way she had lowered herself to Lily's level, the way she had spoken with patience, the way she had respected her world. And Alexander found himself doing the same. He didn't push Lily to respond the way he once had. He didn't get frustrated when she needed extra time or quiet. Instead, he began to wait, to listen, to simply be present. Slowly, their relationship began to change. Lily started to let him into her world a little more. Some evenings she would bring him Benny, placing the stuffed rabbit gently on his lap, which in her way meant she trusted him enough to share. Other times, she would let him sit beside her as she lined up her toys, and though she never asked for help, she seemed to enjoy his company. To Alexander, these little gestures felt larger than any business achievement he had ever celebrated. They were priceless. But he could not forget Grace. Her face lingered in his thoughts like a guiding light. He returned to the diner a few more times, sometimes with Lily, sometimes alone. Each time, Grace treated them with the same warmth. She never brought up his wealth, never asked for favors, never acted differently because of who he was. She was simply kind, genuine, and steady. One afternoon, while Lily was at home with her teacher, Alexander sat across from Grace at an empty table during her short break. He had asked if she could spare a few minutes, and though she looked surprised, she agreed. "You told me once you wanted to study," he said gently. Grace nodded, a little shy. "Yes. I've always wanted to work with children. Maybe as a teacher, or in therapy. But it's hard to manage with bills and family. For now, this job is what I have." Alexander listened carefully. He thought of all the young people he had met in his life, many of them eager for success but chasing only money. Grace was different. Her dream wasn't about wealth or fame. It was about helping others. He respected that deeply. "You have a gift," he told her sincerely. "What you did for my daughter, you should never think it was small. It was extraordinary." Grace lowered her eyes, a faint blush on her cheeks. "It was just kindness. Anyone could have done it." "No," Alexander said firmly, shaking his head. "Not everyone would have seen her. Not everyone would have known how to step into her world. That takes something special." For a moment, Grace didn't answer. She looked out the window, her expression thoughtful. Then she smiled softly. "Your daughter is special. She only needed someone patient enough to see it." Alexander left that day with a decision forming in his heart. He would not let her kindness go unnoticed. He had the means to help her, and though she had never asked for anything, he felt it was the right thing to do. Over the next weeks, Alexander quietly arranged for a scholarship fund under Grace's name. He made sure it would cover her studies if she chose to pursue them, along with living expenses so she could focus fully on her dreams. He didn't tell her right away. He wanted the moment to be right, and more than that, he wanted her to know it came not as charity but as gratitude, as a way of honoring the gift she had given his daughter. When he finally told her, she was shocked. She shook her head at first, insisting she couldn't accept it. But Alexander explained softly, "This isn't a gift from me. It's a thank you from Lily. You gave her comfort when she needed it most. That's something I'll never be able to repay fully. But at least I can make sure you have the chance to follow your dream." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. "Then I'll accept it," she whispered, "but only if I promise to use it to help children like Lily." Alexander felt his chest tighten with emotion. "That's all I could ever hope for." As time passed, Grace began her studies, and Alexander kept in touch with her. She visited Lily sometimes, not as a waitress but as a friend. Lily seemed to remember her well. She would greet her by placing Benny in her lap, which was Lily's way of welcoming someone into her circle. Grace would laugh softly, thanking Benny for trusting her. Those little visits became moments of joy for both father and daughter. Meanwhile, Alexander's own life changed in ways he had never expected. He no longer measured his days only by profits or accomplishments. Instead, he measured them by the small victories with his daughter, the times she looked at him and smiled, the moments she whispered a few words, the rare but precious times she reached for his hand. Each of these moments became treasures more valuable than all the wealth he owned. He also found himself softer with people in general. In meetings, he listened more. In his company, he noticed workers he had once overlooked. He realized how many people, like Grace, carried quiet strength and hidden dreams, unnoticed by the world. He began to support projects that focused on families, children, and education. His life's focus shifted from building an empire to building connections. One evening, months after that first night at the diner, Alexander took Lily back there. The restaurant looked the same: simple tables, warm smells, families gathered in laughter. But for him, it felt different. It felt like the place where his life had quietly been transformed. Lily sat at the same corner booth, Benny tucked safely beside her. She was calmer than before, still humming softly but no longer fearful of the restaurant's noises. She glanced at the menu and pointed at the picture of pancakes again, a small smile on her lips. Alexander chuckled softly. "Pancakes, just like last time," he said, squeezing her little hand. Grace wasn't working that night, but Alexander could feel her presence in the memories that filled the room. He watched his daughter carefully cut her pancakes, her little fingers working patiently, and his heart swelled with gratitude. For a long moment, he just sat there, letting the scene sink into his heart: the ordinary families, the laughter, the smell of food, the soft glow of lights. To anyone else, it was just another evening in a diner. But to him, it was everything. As they finished their meal, Lily looked up at him and whispered, "Daddy." Alexander leaned closer, his heart pounding at the sound of her voice. "Yes, sweetheart." She held up Benny and the paper boat, which she still carried in her bag. "Benny likes pancakes too." Alexander's eyes burned with tears, and he laughed softly, nodding. "Then we'll make sure Benny always has pancakes." In that moment, he realized how far they had come. And he knew it was all because one night, a kind young woman named Grace had seen his daughter not as a problem, not as a burden, but as a child who deserved patience and love. From that night on, Alexander lived differently. He still had his wealth, his business, his influence. But more importantly, he had learned the greatest truth: the most valuable treasures in life were not bought with money, but given freely with compassion. And he vowed never to forget it.